What's up, everybody? Welcome to Southern Life. On this video, we're going to give you guys a tour of the real streets of Miami. We're going to start in the Liberty City neighborhood, which is the most dangerous section of the city of Miami. Even though I've only been here a few times through this neighborhood, I have seen some things hard to look at on these streets because there's constantly something going on here. It's a very dangerous neighborhood, and it's the type of place where even if you spent very little time there, you're going to end up seeing some very difficult sights. It is probably the most dangerous neighborhood in the entire state of Florida, and there's always something going on here. You can see the area is very well patrolled by police, and it doesn't seem to stop some of the things that go on here from going on. Saludos a toda mi gente cubana, all my Haitians, todos los tigres. ¿Qué pasa con los tigres dominicanos? So, Miami is a place that, well, in fact, right here in this little store, Charlie Boo did an interview recently with some guys. Miami's a crazy place. It's a place that's got a lot of life, but it's also got some very interesting neighborhoods. And on this video, I'm going to give you guys a tour of some of the most interesting neighborhoods. These are the new projects, Liberty Square, the new government housing going in. And it's very interesting how they're making really nice buildings going into this neighborhood. Gentrification has long ago been the agenda for a lot of people in Miami, and they're trying to take over a lot of the African American neighborhoods and Haitian neighborhoods, and they're slowly becoming Latino or white areas. Neighborhoods that were predominantly very Haitian, very black, and very dangerous neighborhoods are slowly being bought out by Latinos and whites, and it's happening at a rate that's incredible. I don't know where this community is being dispersed to, what area they're ending up in. Little Liberty City seems to be one of the few areas that's kind of holding on this encroachment of people trying to buy out these neighborhoods to gentrify them. There is a mural for the 2 Live crew here, and the city has played an important role in music and hip-hop as far as getting that culture started, and it's very kind of disturbing what is going on to this community where the culture, the Miami street culture, is being eliminated by gentrification in a place of a unique culture and lots of history is kind of being wiped away by the desire to possess this land, which is very valuable land. It really is land that, being in South Florida, in the tropical weather, where the warm in the winter, that a lot of people want this land, and it's very close to downtown Miami, large city, one of the largest cities in the country with great weather, no snow ever, and that's an attractive thing for a lot of people, and it's putting the people that are native from here in a situation where they're constantly being pushed out of their neighborhoods into less and less desirable areas. And as we go through this video, we'll talk about different neighborhoods and how they have changed. Predominantly, Liberty City has seen in all directions an encroachment by Latinos and whites who do want to buy this land and do want to change neighborhoods. And a lot of neighborhoods have changed dramatically in a very short period of time. And we're going to look at those neighborhoods later on in this video. For as dangerous as this neighborhood in this section of Miami is, I don't really feel troubled going through here. I'm very familiar with Miami and how things work, and I kind of feel like, since I'm from South Florida, I kind of feel comfortable in this area. Unless there's something going on, there's times where you go into this neighborhood and something recently took place, and then the neighborhood is on fire, everybody's on alert, everybody's tense, and there's times when you go into these neighborhoods and you really you can feel it, you know. I've been in this neighborhood a few times where it's very tense, so on this trip it was very relaxed. You could tell nothing's going around, so it feels relaxed compared to other times when I've been in this neighborhood, and you can feel a very tense situation in the air. Perhaps people are expecting some type of retaliation, or they're expecting an attack or something of those lines, and then when you drive through that neighborhood, you can feel that you're being watched. You can feel that people are kind of ready to go at you at any moment. So on this trip, it felt very nice and calm, so didn't really have any worries on this trip. You can kind of tell when things are in kind of bad shape and when the neighborhood's kind of more relaxed. And that's a very odd thing for strangers, but the people that live in these communities, they have become acclimated, or perhaps desensitized is the term that some people use towards these types of events. Oh man, he got 22s in that place. I just feel that overall, every time I go to Miami, I see less of the culture, less of the real Miami people. And granted, there have been some incredible advances as far as safety, as far as investment in the communities, as far as how civilized a place feels. But some of that wild aspect of Miami is what kind of made it be Miami. And I do wonder how long Miami is going to be Miami before it just becomes this gentrified place like Nashville, like every other place where gentrification has stripped away the core of the community and kind of left an artificial feeling place. I was surprised that there's still in 2021 people living on this side over here. You guys saw the new buildings. I thought that by now they would have got rid of the old buildings, but as you can see, there's still people inhabiting the old projects, and kind of wondered why it's been moving so slowly. I really think that they should leave some of these original buildings and kind of paint them and gentrify them a little bit and maybe rent them out to people as a reminder, because I think these projects, these are the pork and beans. They're so important to the community. There's so much history there that it's just incredible how the community allowed these buildings to be destroyed in their entirety, which is what I think they're planning to do. I think they need to leave some of those buildings there, maybe a block or two, and just kind of, make them into condos or something, so that they're still there as a reminder of the importance that those, even though it's government housing, I do feel that African Americans have let stuff that is part of their community be stripped away and kind of be done away with. And I cannot stress this enough, how I feel that the African American community in Miami needs to stand up for some of these things and say, okay, I understand, it's good that you guys are getting rid of these buildings and putting up new ones, but let's leave like 2 of these blocks, turn them into condos, and the structures, leave them there for next generations. Because when you think about how many thousands of people lived in those apartments, thousands and thousands of people, you understand that there should be a significance to the community for that place, even though it's just government housing. We're gonna go into Gladeview. Now, these are trailer parks. This is probably some of the roughest neighborhoods I've ever seen in the United States. I mean, this neighborhood almost resembles a third world country. Like, I've been to Cuba, and I have family that lives in the Dominican Republic and Mexico and stuff like that. And pretty much this section of Miami is straight up out of another country. Like, this doesn't even resemble the United States. It's a mobile home park that a lot of people have kind of stuccoed up the mobile homes and kind of made them look like houses. Other parts of it look like little businesses. Definitely, and it is very diverse. There's people from all types of countries in these mobile home parks. And it is just the roughest thing I've ever seen in the United States as far as structural sanity of the place. Very interesting little neighborhood in Northwest Miami. It's a trailer park, and I'll tell you, it is about as rough as a place as I have seen, even in Miami. Many years back, there were empty lots like this right here on a corner. They would pop up these makeshift tent cities, and at a point they were really large. And of course, they've not gotten rid of that, and they've had to fence in a lot of the empty lots in this section of Miami so they don't turn into tent cities. So I guess this is kind of like the next thing near that. But definitely a very interesting drive through these mobile home parks. Notice the metal bars on the windows. This is just incredible. I mean, I've seen some poor neighborhoods in the United States, but this neighborhood here, it almost feels like you're in the Dominican Republic or like you're in Cuba. It definitely has a not United States feel to it. Very rough little place. And you'll notice further up ahead there was kind of like a little roadblock that we had to get through. Luckily, I am Cuban, and I kind of know how to kind of talk myself out of that situation. but definitely if you definitely a rough neighborhood where if you don't look like you fit in, you could probably be a little bit intimidated. But I love it though. It reminded me so much of Cuba, and I can see how somebody who grew up in a country like the Dominican Republic would kind of feel at home in a neighborhood like this because it does really resemble something else. So it was very interesting to see this type of neighborhood. And Miami's probably one of the few places in the country where something like this exists. ¿Hay salida para allá, mi hermano?
¿Ah?
¿Hay salida para allá?
Claro que sí, papá.
Ok, Pipo, gracias.
Lo que tienes que hacer es, enseguida que llegan los zafacones, si quieres salir de aquí, dobla tu mano derecha.
Ajá.
Dobla tu mano derecha ahora.
Ajá. Ahí mismo, ahí.
Aquí mismo en los zafacones, doblas a tu mano derecha y sales a los buzones y a mano izquierda y sales a salir afuera a la calle.
Dale, hermano, gracias. So yeah, Miami's the type of place where it's good to know Spanish, and especially Spanish with a Cuban accent, because like even like when I go into like the Haitian neighborhoods, way back when Miami was way rougher, you know, if you're Cuban, and you know, it just opens a lot of doors in Miami. You can get around anywhere. You know, there's so many Cubans in Miami that it's hard for anybody to really try to threat on Cubans. You know, so as a Cuban, you can get into like the Haitian neighborhoods and a lot of neighborhoods where a lot of other people probably can't get into. So knowing Spanish in Miami is a must. And if you're thinking about moving to Miami, you really need to consider how much Spanish you know, because in Miami, even getting employment, you know, you gotta know Spanish. Even a lot of the Haitians that speak Creole, a lot of people that are Haitian, Haitian, Haiti, they learn Spanish because the Dominican Republic is right next to Haiti, so it's natural for Haitians to know enough Spanish. But if you don't know Spanish or Creole, you know, the English language may not even get you through a drive-through in a lot of places. Now, if you pay attention, even though these are mobile homes, they have metal bars on the windows. That's a very interesting thing to see on a mobile home. Another thing that is relevant to the language situation is that over the last few years, there was an incident in Hialeah where somebody went through a drive-through and they couldn't order food in English, and this video ended up on YouTube where the lady was telling her, hey, if you don't speak Spanish, you can't come through this drive-through. And it was like a KFC or a Wendy's or McDonald's. I can't remember what it was. Nonetheless, that video became viral, and a lot of restaurants in the Miami area have started to tell their employees, hey, if you don't know English, you can't get a job, because you could hold those jobs without knowing English. And there's a large push between Cubans to kind of say, hey, okay, now we gotta learn English, because Miami's a place where a lot of people who refuse to learn English have kind of hunkered down into their communities. And, well, they've come to the conclusion where, okay, if you don't know English, you can't get certain jobs, because you know, it just isn't right that, you know, a lot of people are trying to impose themselves. And even in Hialeah, which the next neighborhood we're going to cruise through, which is a suburb of Miami, 97% Latino, 3% white American. And those white Americans, for the most part, all speak Spanish. And a lot of them will tell you that it is a safe place to live. If you talk to these Americans that live here, which I have, a lot of them will tell you that they feel very safe in Hialeah, because Cubans are very tight-knit, they're very cliquish, so they don't even allow, there's not very many African Americans or blacks here. It's kind of a Latino-only community where only Puerto Ricans and Colombians and other Latinos have been allowed to move in. Even some Latinos from Central America really don't want to move into here because it's kind of discriminatory in a sense. So it's kind of a white-only community, because they're very discriminatory against other races. So Hialeah is probably one of the least, according to many websites, least diverse place. So when you think about, you know, exclusion of people from living in a neighborhood, it's ironic that a Cuban community has decided not to allow any type of diversity. And many websites rank Hialeah as the least diverse place in the United States. Not Coleman, Alabama, or some little place out there. No, it's This is the community that has excluded other people from moving into it more than anywhere else. It's the least diverse city in the entire country. It also has the lowest murder rate of any city in the country. Ironically, especially for the size of Hialeah, of over 200,000 people, to have just a low murder rate, something like 2 or 3 per 100,000, which a lot of places that strive to be low crime, like Naples, Florida, for example, are about 2 to 3 times higher murder rates. So it's incredible that this community has kind of created a safe place for the residents, even though it's not really done in a very politically correct fashion. And I'm just spitting facts here. I mean, that's the reality of it. Hialeah does have the lowest murder rate, lowest crime rate of any city its size in the entire country. And it is the least diverse place in the country because the community has tried to exclude other people from moving into it. A lot of it has to do with people that are so backwards that they refuse to learn English. They're so set in their ways that even though they live in the United States, they refuse to learn English, and it's a big giant mess. The real estate is extraordinarily expensive, with houses now being into the $400,000 range, and we're not talking luxurious houses. We're talking houses that are kind of outdated, like houses from the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. This is a commercial district. There's a lot of industry here. One of the biggest industries in Miami, Hialeah area, is selling you a crashed car. So they get a lot of vehicles that are crashed and they kind of repair them. So that's a very big thing in Hialeah. And it probably comes from the fact that in Cuba there's so many specialists on auto repairs, because in Cuba they're not allowed to import anything. They can't get their hands on anything really in Cuba. So for the most part, by the way, if you like your stuff, your pieces, there's 2 stores here. There's one pawn shop, and then there's a range across the street right there in that intersection on 103rd, and the prices seemed really affordable compared to what I see here in Alabama. As far as like some things in Alabama that are sought after by country people are quite expensive. I found that and they had just about everything that you can't get right now at the Bass Pro Shop or at your local AMMO place. If you can't get it, you can get it in Miami. Now the prices were outrageous, and they had every single type of everything. So I resupplied a little bit because, here in Alabama it is hard to get that crap. Although I will tell you the price that I paid was ridiculous. But yeah, it seems like, this auto industry of repairing cars and, auto repairs and, fixing up cars and shopping up one car and making one car out of 2 cars that are crashed and stuff like that. That's a really big business out here, and there's a lot of businesses that do that, and there are some very skilled people that do that in these little commercial parks. So if you're into that, then it's a good place to get your car done up, whatever crap you're trying to do your crash car. So that's a major industry, and you can kind of see that there's an entire district here that just kind of revolves around used car parts, scrap yards, auto repair, body shops, and a few other fabrication type businesses. So that does feed a lot of industry in the city, and it employs a lot of people, and a lot of people are actually mom and pop places that are doing this, so they're able to really kind of create a lot of industry in the area, bring a lot of jobs to the area, and this is one of the biggest sources of income for the people in this area. I know usually an industrial park is probably the most boring crap you could drive through, but I had to throw this in here because this is kind of a unique little place. There's so much going on in these commercial parks, and you can drive through there on a Sunday at 3 in the morning and there's something going on in there. So it's an interesting area to drive through because there's always some type of interesting activity going on in these little commercial parks in Hialeah. Cubans are very fanatical about their capitalism and the idea of having your own body shop or your own fabrication of whatever. I mean, there's all types of interesting little niche fabrication and shops and stuff in here. And it's just an interesting place to go and see how a lot of people have kind of done well for themselves, out there. Like I said, Miami is a city of hustlers, and nonetheless, a Cuban community coming from a place with a lot of hardships are absolutely top ranking when it comes to their creativity and their ability to make something out of nothing. When you think about Miami, you got people coming from Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica. A lot of these people came with absolutely nothing. And now a regular house is 400,000, if not more. So the evolution of this place, from a place where people came here with nothing, and now you have industry, you have international trade, you have really seen a community who has made something out of nothing through hard work. I mean, sheer hard work and dedication, skill and effort. And sometimes a community that really has failed to adapt to the United States in a lot of senses. In a lot of ways, it really has failed to adapt to the norm of the United States. But nonetheless, it still has its own virtues as a community, like hard work, effort, and dedication to create a community of people who, like I said, came from nothing, and now they're doing. I mean, like when you look at the transformation of these communities over the decades and stuff, what they came from and where they are now, you kind of almost have to respect it, because a lot of places, people who migrate to other countries, they don't really have that success story. But then you have like the Cuban community in Florida, the Italians in New York, a lot of communities, a lot of Asians in California who come here and they evolve into their own powerhouse of industry, trade, and just globalize whatever they're doing. It's just incredible, and it does merit some type of respect that this community, while may look very hostile and kind of standoffish to outsiders, but nonetheless has evolved and just made their own economy, their own form of Americanism, their own form of America, their own understanding of what America should be about. And that is the influx of people that through the ages have come to the United States, may have been Irish, Scottish, Swedish, whatever. Everybody came here and kind of infused their own flavor, their own culture into America. And Miami has done that. But now it's at the point where the infusion, the addition, the fabric of these people, the Cuban community, is no longer contributing, but it's mixing into the melting pot, and now Cuban culture has spread out to Colombians, Dominicans, Americans, and Cubans have also soaked in a lot from other people, to where now you go to a Cuban restaurant and they have to have some Colombian dishes, they have to have some Mexican dishes. And the other way around, you go into a Colombian restaurant and they gotta have Cuban coffee. Or you go into an American restaurant and they gotta have a Cuban sandwich, they gotta have a Cuban steak sandwich, they gotta have the Cuban coffee. So it's kind of at the point where now, a lot of the culture, a lot of the Cubanism has been lost. It's been spread out, and other people have absorbed like the best things of the culture, the Cuban coffee, the food, the music. But the Cubans have also had to stop contracting into their own culture and soak in. And a lot of Cubans, more than any other nationality, I think, have tried to contract back into their own culture. Because remember, Cubans are different in that, they didn't want to come to the United States and become Americans. They kind of didn't have a choice but to leave their country. There are people who didn't want to leave their country. So they're trying to hold on to being Cuban as much as they can. We talked about changes in neighborhoods. Little Havana, it's named after Havana, Cuba. Now there's more Central Americans there, so that section of Southwest Miami that was historically Cuban is now Central American. Now a lot of the Central American countries, they've left the Cuban restaurants there. So now, even though there's barely Cubans left in that neighborhood, Cuban has become an umbrella term for Miami Latin flavor, where now people from other countries, Venezuela, Central America, are kind of falling under that umbrella term. And now you have a neighborhood that is culturally identifies as Cuban in every sense, from the businesses to the music they play on the street corners to everything is Cuban, but it's no longer where the heart of the Cuban community is at. The community has shifted, but it's left behind so many artifacts and so many pieces of its culture. Now that the Latin Americans that are going there from Central America are kind of running with it, and now you see a community that, if it looks Cuban, it's labeled Cuban, but it's really Central American. And it's just interesting how this melting pot of cultures in Miami have kind of infused so much change. You also have neighborhoods that are Dominican, and Cubans, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans usually mix very well, but Miami is a very segregated place. In other words, everybody sticks to their own race. You have Dominican neighborhoods like Alapata, you have Haitian neighborhoods like Little Haiti, Opa-locka, but now you have a situation where the Cubans are shifting into northwest Miami, Opa-locka, and they're taking neighborhoods that were historically African American and Haitian and turning them into Latino. And there's also Nicaraguans and other people from other countries in that mix. So it's interesting to see how there's been a complete shift of demographics within neighborhoods, and in a very short time, some of the neighborhoods we're going to get into here later on in the video, we'll talk about how quickly they've changed. Now this is Hialeah. This area still remains predominantly Cuban. Really high real estate prices, something that is like ridiculous in all sense, especially considering what jobs pay in the area. I have no idea how people are able to make it. I guess a lot of houses are duplexes, threeplexes, somebody in the garage, efficiency, super high rents, and somehow between all that extravagance, there's still people able to, without even knowing English, live in a $400,000 house. I still don't even comprehend how people are able to pull this off, but it's just the affordability aspect of it isn't even a matter in the equation. Again, you have people who just don't want to learn English, and they have all kind of soaked into this community to where now there's so much desire to live in this place. And it is a city that is infused with so much Cuban culture that if I could afford to live somewhere, I would actually consider living here instead of living in a gated community with a golf course. I would actually, if I were able to have a winter home somewhere, I would actually consider having it in Hialeah, because, like I said, crime does not seem to be a problem here for the most part. And on top of that, houses are so secured. You have fences, you have metal bars on the windows, you got like bulletproof windows, you got like alarm systems, and then you got like a metal fence with like barbed wire on it. It's a very, like, houses are like fortresses here to where you couldn't get in if you tried. I mean, unless you have like an army tank or something, you couldn't get into these houses if you tried to. So it kind of explains why, for the most part, there really ain't that much crime in as far as like people breaking in the house and stuff, because it's almost impossible. Now, it has become a thing recently in Miami for people to start pulling off those metal bars off the windows in neighborhoods like Hialeah. It's unsightly, and it promotes, and it kind of makes the neighborhood look trashy, and makes the neighborhood look super dangerous. So if you start to drive through Hialeah now, you're starting to see a lot of those metal bars coming off the windows. Maybe they'll still go with like a super safety glass where the windows are still super hard to break. And anyways, the hurricane code requires that anyways if you're changing windows. So if you're going to put in, new windows in your house, you might as well, you're required to go with these hurricane windows, and they're almost unbreakable. So it kind of makes sense not to have the metal bars on the windows because of the hurricane windows that are being put on the houses, and the fact that a lot of people are saying, hey, this kind of looks trashy, and it makes the neighborhood, not like it's going to become more attractive to a lot of American buyers, but you never know. I mean, it could be like where now a lot of areas are being gentrified, even worse areas are being gentrified, where eventually there may be an influx of American white buyers who start to buy real estate in Hialeah because of the low crime rate. And a lot of the Americans that already live there seem to really like it. Now, I've met a lot of Americans who moved away and it's either you really love Hialeah or you really hate it. I met a lot of people who really hate Hialeah because it was a normal Florida town before all these Cubans came and totally changed everything. And these people have a serious dislike of what Hialeah stands for. So it's a love or hate relationship. It's a place where you really love it or you really, really hate it. There doesn't seem to be much of a middle ground. Me, I personally love Hialeah. And again, if I was ever in the market for Miami, I would personally consider Hialeah because if I was going to live in Miami, I would do it for the Cuban culture, and I would do it in a place where I can feel safe, and Hialeah has all that going for it. And I don't like Doral and Kendall and all these areas that seem to be suburban. If I'm going to live in Miami, I'm going to live in Hialeah because I'm Cuban, and that's what I would want. And if I'm able to in the future, as I progress, to be able to have a winter home, I would probably look at it in Hialeah, as crazy as that sounds. Could I live there full time? Probably not. It's probably too much traffic, too much congestion. But to have a winter home down there for me would seem attractive. And a lot of young kids who grew up in the Miami area, especially Hialeah, they moved on to New York, Carolinas, Ohio, Kentucky, blah blah. They went out there, saw the world. When they're getting to about their 30s, they get off a little bit more economically. There's a lot of young kids moving back to Hialeah. In fact, there was even a TV show that was about something like that, where I guess it was a Cuban girl who married a white guy, and then they brought the white guy to Hialeah. It never really took off, but it was on YouTube, and they were gonna make like a TV series out of it, and it never went anywhere. I don't know if it was because of the actors or the funding or whatever. It didn't seem to be really enough audience into it. But nonetheless, I thought it was a cool... it's happening. It really is happening to a lot of people, where now Americans are starting to mix with Cubans, and a lot of the Americans are ending up in Hialeah. But with as competitive as the market is, it's kind of unattractive for Americans. And the fact that a lot of people just refuse to learn the language, and a lot of the stuff you see around town kind of seems a little bit too much for the sensibilities of Americans, you can say. So we cross over into Little River. Now this brings us into the city of Miami area. Dominicans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Cubans. It's more diverse on this side here of Miami. Also a little bit more hood, a little bit higher crime. So it does change the demographics a little bit into more African American, more Latin American, more blacks, higher crime rates, and a lot more changes. Now this area again used to be predominantly black. I could not believe how quickly Little River and this northwest section of Miami went from being a high crime black area, predominantly Haitian, and overnight Latinos came in, and it seems like almost overnight Latinos came in and started fixing up the houses. And they're probably people who, what happened was, it wasn't an unattractive area from a real estate perspective, and the Latinos started to buy this real estate because it was affordable, and enough of them did it to where they kind of took over the neighborhood. So the Dominicans have kind of set roots in here. There's also a lot of Puerto Ricans coming here, so they've kind of bought out this area and transformed it in a very short time to where there's neighborhoods where, I kid you not, you would see like gangs walking around where, I have family that lived in Little River. They've been there way before the other Latinos got in that neighborhood. There was a place where that used to be like 10 or 5% Latino, and now you go in there and you can just tell, wow, this neighborhood just all of a sudden became like 90% Latino in a very short period of time. And it was the affordability. Like Opalaca, for example, got so bad that there started to be vacancy. And they came in, they snatched up the real estate, they fixed it up, and now you have neighborhoods that totally transformed. And you can tell these neighborhoods transform. Usually, when you drive through a neighborhood, you can't tell who's living in it. In Miami, you can tell because Latinos, the first thing they do is they stucco the house, they paint it, they put up some mango trees, some banana trees, some palm trees, put up a fence, and boom, you drive by and you're like, oh crap, you can tell this neighborhood is predominantly Latino by some of the features like fencing, little. You can just tell, like, the vehicles, the fencing. Like, you can tell this neighborhood. Oh crap! This neighborhood just totally became Latino. Where overnight, it's incredible how fast Northwest Miami went from being black to being Latino. It was just incredible to see. I didn't even know a neighborhood could transform that quickly. But Miami is lowering its crime rate. It's attracting a lot more white buyers. Latinos are kind of moving into the black areas. And I feel that eventually a lot of the Latino areas, once they become all Latino, then white will come in again. And it's just a constant cycle of the poor people getting pushed out of their neighborhoods, to where I think eventually Latinos are going to get pushed out of Miami as well. But it's a progressive thing, and we'll see which way it goes. This little particular neighborhood here, I got family that lives in there, and you probably wouldn't even want to go in there at night. I mean, there would be people walking around in groups. It was downright scary to drive through some of these neighborhoods. And now you go in there and you're like, wow, how quickly it changed. Like North Miami, for example, there were areas that were poor African American. Now they're like very well off African Americans. Like last time I went through North Miami, really kind of like, wow, awesome. It's just a community where, there are African Americans that are taking neighborhoods and doing the same thing, and they also have good economical power. The thing about North Miami is the traffic is unbearable. It's kind of like a star there of highways, and it's a very hectic commute. I couldn't do it. Also, a lot of African Americans with a lot of money in Broward County. So it's just a transformation of the entire area that I do feel that eventually, as real estate in Florida becomes more attractive, gentrification has turned a lot of core neighborhoods that used to be mostly Latino or slowly starting to become white. A lot of that's going on in the more attractive southwest side of Miami, but it's also happening in northwest Miami. So I do think that Miami will eventually become a wider area. It's going to drive even higher real estate prices. A lot of my subscribers don't like when I break things down racially like that, but the reality of it is that it does matter, and it does drive real estate. And if you fail to notice these trends and how gentrification displaces communities, then like me as a Latino, I feel that we should, as a Cuban, like when I drive through Little Havana, I see there's no more Cubans left. I'm like, yo, this is supposed to be ours. And I'm sure African Americans can feel the same way about like Little Haiti, or Haitians can feel the same way about Little Haiti or Liberty City, whatever, Northwest Miami. They usually be like, yo, this is supposed to be ours. But at the same time, it does allow for communities to find other places and to live in better conditions, because when there's pressure for real estate, it kind of creates situations where the residents are forced to, like me, I left South Florida. I lived in a single wide mobile home in South Florida in a bad neighborhood. Now I live on a 3-bedroom 2-bath house on an acre. So that displacement does give you an opportunity to have better living conditions somewhere else and to escape the hectic lifestyle of the city. So it's not always a bad thing. A lot of African Americans from Miami have been able to find real estate in Jacksonville and Ocala, and they made good profits on the properties they lost in Miami. But now you have people in North Florida from South Florida who are living a lot more decently. So it does create opportunity for communities to improve their living standard if they're willing to sell and move somewhere more affordable. So it's not always a loss to the people, especially when they're communities that really weren't doing much to begin with as far as offering opportunity to its residents. To understand the economy and the real estate of a place like Florida, you really do have to break it down along racial along cultural lines and stuff like that, because everybody has different habits of buying in real estate. You have communities that are more transient. You have communities that are not. Like, for example, Central Americans are very transient. They move around. There was Mexican communities in Florida that are gone today. So you have to understand all that. And as soon as the Mexicans moved out, Central Americans moved in and filled the void right behind them. So in order to understand real estate, you do have to pay close attention to each particular group and what they're doing and their buying habits. And that's super important. A lot of investors don't realize that. Give you an idea, Cubans, Latinos in general, but specifically Cubans, when they buy real estate, they don't sell it. They will not move. And it's almost like a plague that drives up prices. And that's why Hialeah, they want $400,000 for a house in Hialeah. You're like, why would a house in Hialeah be worth $400,000? It's because when they buy real estate, they don't let go of it, no matter what. Even if they start buying out, and that's kind of what's happened in Miami, where the Cubans have refused to sell out. And a lot of other communities, like African Americans, they were kind of smarter. They took the money and ran, and now you have all over North Florida, Ocala, and other places, and even in Tampa, a lot of African Americans from Miami who made a huge profit and ran with it. And then you have other African American communities where, like in Fort Myers, where they don't sell out. And then it's actually a detrimental thing to the community because it doesn't allow people to progress into better things. A lot of the older African Americans are not willing to do it. They are going to hold down their neighborhoods, and that's where they're not going to let it go. But a little bit younger, they are willing to let go of that real estate. So you have to look at all that, because every group has different habits. You have some communities that are extremely, like white Americans are very. A white American will live in 20 different states. By the I know white Americans. They'll live in Florida for 2 years, and they go to Colorado, then they go to New York, and from New York they go to Texas, and then to California, and then they get out in Idaho, and it's just they're willing to relocate, and that allows that person much better economical mobility. And I, as a Latino, realized, I bought my property, and I said, I'm never going to move out of Naples. I'm going to hold on to this forever. And then I started to watch what white people were doing. I'm like, yo, this is ridiculous. Why am I holding on to this property forever? That makes no sense. And I told myself I have to change my culture because it's going to allow me better economical mobility. And sure enough, we did it. It was scary as crap to move to Alabama. But I realized that now I'll live in any state. I live in Alaska if I had to, or if I needed to, or if I felt it would be advantageous for me. And with that mobility comes the opportunity to improve your overall economical situation at a much faster rate. And a lot of Americans are willing to do that. And it gives them, better outlook in the future. It's something that is part of my culture that I've had to say, okay, if I'm going to improve my life, I have to do it. And I do think a lot of Cubans really do need to sell that $500,000 house that they have in Miami and take that money to Alabama, take it to Georgia, take it to Tennessee, and maybe that $500,000 can become $3 million. But I don't think a lot of people are going to do that because they're set in their ways and they're not exposed to the economical benefits of doing it. For example, what opened up my eyes to it was working for wealthy people in Florida, in Naples, Florida, where I lived. Worked for a lot of wealthy Americans, and I was like, yo, these people are moving all the time, and every time they move, they make a profit. And that opened up my eyes to a way of changing my life. So the Haitians have done it to an extent. A lot of Haitians have lost the fear. I know Haitians in Iowa, I know Haitians in Wisconsin, Haitians in Chicago, Haitians in Kentucky. Georgia's full of Haitians. I've seen Haitians even in Alabama, Texas. A lot of Haitians have said, hey, let's get this money and run and see the United States. Jamaicans have dispersed all over the place. And now you see a lot of Jamaicans who've really done really well for themselves. So some communities are willing to say, hey, let's take the money and run and make our lives better somewhere else. Other communities, like the Cuban community in Miami, just isn't willing to uproot because they want to be close to Cuba. It's almost like an emotional thing for them. But I think more than an emotional thing, realistically, if you're Cuban and you live in the United States, you're going to be here. Your children are going to be here. Your great-grandchildren are going to be here. You're an American now. I do think it's fear. And, well, there it is, guys. I do want to let you guys know there are changes going on in Miami, and real estate is driving a lot of that, and it's affecting communities. What's your opinion? How do you feel about everything? Make sure you get in the comment section. Check it out.